Mike, your host. Thanks for joining us. It's good to be back with everyone. I know I've been gone the last couple of weeks, haven't been able to do a broadcast, but I'm back with you now, and it's good to be back. Well, the last few days, there's been a lot of talk about Governor Christie of New Jersey, and I posted a news article or two about it. And Governor Christie has some issues, to put it mildly. I know under his governor administration, that is the big talk now, about one of his staffers was responsible for a retaliatory incident against a mayor of one of the towns that supposedly didn't support Governor Christie. Now, in my news article, I talked a lot about this. And one of the issues I had with Governor Christie is that he was supposedly upset about this mayor not supporting him. Well, the mayor's name was Mark Sokolik, I believe is how you pronounce it, but he's a Democrat. Why would a Republican governor be upset, irritated in any way that somebody from the opposite party would not support you? I mean, that's just something that kind of boggles my mind. If, for sake of example, let's say I was running for office. Okay, I was running for the Republican side. That is the side I would identify more with other than the Democrats. I don't identify with them practically at all. But let's say I ran. Would I be upset that Democrats didn't support me? Of course not. They're the other side. Which brings up a couple questions. If Governor Christie was upset that somebody from what we would view as the other side, which side is he really on, and whose support is he really wanting? That is the big question, and I talked about that in the news article. But if you look at any news outlet, and I went through several of them, CNN, NBC, Fox, almost every single one of them, except for Fox News, was talking about how bad Governor Christie is, and they're talking impeachment and all these other things that are going on with him. Now, personally, I don't know all the facts, so I'm not going to make a swift judgment against Governor Christie. But if he was responsible, then he should be punished for that. Plain and simple. And anybody involved with that, doing something illegal, should also be punished. But if he was ignorant of that fact, such as Nixon's Watergate, he said he didn't know, then his staff should definitely be punished, obviously, those involved. But it brings up a lot of questions. If you don't have your own house in order, then how can we trust you to run the entire nation if you don't know what's going on the doors next to you? And that's one of the biggest issues I have with President Obama, is he claims that he didn't know about the IRS targeting conservative groups. He didn't know about Benghazi. He didn't know this. He didn't know that. Well, if you don't know it, and you're ultimately responsible, then you need to step down. Plain and simple. You don't have your stuff together, then you need to step aside and let somebody who has their stuff together run the show. Whether you agree with President Obama or not, and obviously on almost every issue I don't agree with the president. But you have to admit that if you don't have your stuff together, you're not helping anybody. He'll take responsibility for the things that supposedly go well. The Affordable Health Care Act, for example. It's pretty much called by most people Obamacare. His stamp of approval on it. And it is a abysmal failure. They have manipulated numbers to try to make it look better than it really is, and it's horrible. The website didn't work. They spent millions of dollars, wasted millions of dollars on something that didn't work, and it's got the president's name on it. Now, for most people, clear-thinking people, if your name is attached to something that you did it, it better be awesome. It better be something that works, something that looks good, something that functions. something that you're proud of. I'm sorry, I wouldn't be proud of that. I'd want my name off of it. It's not Obamacare. It would be Smith Care or Hojo Blow Care or let's blame Harry Reid. It's Harry Reid Care. But I wouldn't put my name on it if it was that horrible. So, back to Governor Christie. Keeping your house in order is important. Whether directly involved in this scandal, you need to take responsibility for those you're in charge of. Military is a classic example of that. If an officer has a group of men and they do something illegal, break the law, don't follow orders, the next step up above that officer, let's say it's a lieutenant. The lieutenant's men are insubordinate, they're not doing their job. Well, the captain's going to look at that lieutenant, and the lieutenant's going to be in a lot of trouble because he is not controlling his guys. He is responsible over them. And same thing for the governor. You are responsible for the people that you have in your charge. However you selected them or picked your guys, you're responsible for them. And you better make sure you picked good people that aren't going to do stuff like this. Now, originally when this story broke, I was kind of the mindset of the Democrats should probably hold off on the ace in the hole, grand slam as it were. Because if they could hold that off until after the primaries, because the news media loves picking the Republican candidates for us. I don't know why. Well, okay, I do know why. They want a guy that they can beat. I think enough people on the Republican side made enough of a stink about Governor Christie that the news media looked at him as a not winnable in the Republican primary type candidate. And because they don't like Republicans, they're just going to destroy them. And if you look at every news outlet, minus Fox News, it was all about how bad Christie was and everything. Fox News, on the other hand, talked about a senator stepping down. And they didn't mention much about Governor Christie. They had a few articles. I've read a few. They have a different agenda. The news media, by and large, is liberally biased. And that's one reason why we have ERTT radio. There has to be somebody speaking out for freedom and resisting the tyranny in every form. Whether it's tyranny of the news media, for example. Everything is one-sided. Their side. That's it. And it shouldn't be that way. You should have all points of view and be able to hear all points of view without having to tune into, here's an example, Rush Limbaugh to hear another point of view other than CNN, MSNBC, all the major news media outlets. You should be able to hear both sides. And that is a tyranny that I don't agree with. You should be able, as a clear-thinking adult, legal age vote, even not an adult, let's say somebody, clear-thinking individual, 8, 10, 12, you should be able to listen to all sides of something going by your morals, your standards, and you should be able to make a choice. Hopefully you make the right choice, but you should be able to make that choice. Well, the news media, a lot of times, they don't let you make the choice. They want to make the choice for you. They want to make one side seem so horribly bad that you can't make a choice without looking really dumb, really stupid, for making any choice other than what they think is correct. So as I always encourage my listeners, think for yourself. A lot of people don't seem to do that these days. They let somebody think for them. Well, nobody knows what's best for you like you know what's best for you. The government is good at trying to think for other people. They're good at trying to tell you how you should spend your money. Healthcare is a perfect example of that. They didn't think our healthcare system was working the way it should, so they stepped in and decided to do their own thing, spending our money that we pay in taxes for everybody's healthcare. And yet it raised healthcare prices across the board. Millions of individuals have lost their healthcare coverage. So it didn't make anything better. It was just another example of somebody thinking that they know better than you do about what's best for you. And speaking of thinking for yourself, I do want to give a shout out to it's Democratic Representative McIntyre, I believe, and McCarthy. They're both retiring, plan to retire, but specifically McIntyre, because he is, I don't want to say an enemy of his party, but when it comes to fiscal responsibility, he and his party did not get along. And I want to take my hat off to him, because very few people in government want to be fiscally responsible for somebody else's money. Millions and billions of dollars are raising taxes every year. Tax season's upon us. But people are really great at spending other people's money, wasting it. And he was one of the few that actually wanted to cut those types of pet projects, outrageous spending, and cut it down, even against the mainstream of his own party. And I kind of respect that. When you're willing to stand up against overwhelming opposition to do what's right, you've earned my respect. So, as much as me and Representative McIntyre will probably disagree on a lot of other issues, for his fiscal responsibility, I do have to respect him for that. Another topic that's been going on is the water crisis that's happened in West Virginia. My heart is out to those West Virginians that don't have good drinking water. For those of you who haven't followed the news much, there was a big chemical spill, and a lot of residents don't have good drinking water. And something to think about is how vulnerable we are as a society to something this small. Just a little chemical spill has taken out drinking water for a pretty decent population. And they've had to truck water in, bottles of water. I'll think of this on a larger scale. If it were this was not, but let's just say there was a terrorist attack. A terrorist would really hamper us by attacking our water supply. With all the resources that are going into keep good drinkable water for a huge population, just a few major cities without good drinking water would really handicap our economy. It wouldn't take a whole lot to do. So when you start seeing some of the infrastructure of our country, you start seeing some of the vulnerabilities. How easy it is to handicap a society that is very technologically dependent. You go into the electronics of this age, computers. Most Americans probably have access to a computer. If you're listening to this program right now, you have a computer, a smartphone, or some way to access these broadcasts. Well, you take something like that out of the picture, how do people communicate? How many people even know how to write a letter anymore? Probably not a lot. When was the last time you wrote snail mail letter to somebody? I'm not talking Christmas cards, I'm not talking birthday cards, stuff like that. I'm talking actually sit down and write a letter like you were in the early 1800s. Yeah, doesn't happen anymore. Mail service probably take 2 or 3 days. Those of you know, I live up in Alaska. And I actually get my mail surprisingly fast sometimes for being in Alaska. I've gotten a card from Florida, and it took about 3 days to get here. That's like 6,000 miles just to get up here. But I got it, so it's still a reliable form of communication. So, as a society, we have become very technologically dependent, which is a vulnerability that can be exploited by our enemies. I'm not saying you should go out, stock up on, pallets of water and everything else. I'm not advocating that. But it's something you need to be aware of and possibly think for the future. Natural disasters, a good one. Especially if you're in an area where there's blizzards, tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes. Resources might not always be able to get to you. And that's part of the thinking for yourself. Plan ahead. See the whole picture. A lot of people are stuck in their short little immediate realm. What's here now? What's the instant gratification? but they don't see the big picture of what's coming down the road or what could come down the road. If a terrorist attack or something were to happen again, a lot of people are going to be caught unprepared if it were to affect our infrastructure, like, let's say, the chemical spill in West Virginia. I'm hoping they get the water situation under control and they get good drinking water again, because it is a drain on the economy. And that's not the only reason. There are people out there suffering because they can't do what they normally do. So my heart goes out to them. But speaking of terrorists, Al Qaeda is actually making significant progress in Iraq, which is kind of sad. The United States has attempted to set up democratic forms of government in countries that it's not really going to work. The religious society is something that's not really conducive to the freedoms that we want to offer people. Now, I'm not saying Muslims, Islamic people can't be free. I am not advocating that. However, how many people have actually read the Quran and understand what it says? They don't offer the freedoms that we have. If you are of a different faith, you don't get the freedoms. You can be terrorized and killed. One of the things that's been big in the news now is they're actually recruiting here in the United States. And one of the things that has always bugged me is that common sense is shoved down the toilet for the sake of political correctness. And what I mean by that is, for a Christian, I can't say what I believe as a Christian in a school, in a public school setting. However, if you are of a different faith, let's say Muslim, for example, we have to let you express your religious beliefs. But the Christian guy has to be quiet because separation of church and state. And it's a double standard. It is not something that we should have in this country. Now, I'm not saying Christians have always been peaceful. Okay, if you look at the Catholic Church, for example, mention the Crusades. Okay, those were very violent times. But you can't say the Muslim religion is a peaceful religion. Now, there are also religious zealots on any religious form. They can take the Bible, the Quran, any religious book, and they can twist it or follow it to the letter, depending on the religious text, and become dangerous to society, to those who want to be free. But we don't see that. We want to dig our heads in the sand. And we ignore the obvious threat that some group of people pose. And Al Qaeda, obviously, we armed them back in the Cold War. Well, now it's coming back to bite us in the butt. One of the things they considered in Syria, which I can't understand anybody's thinking here. Whoever suggested this was nuts. But to think that, okay, we are fighting Al Qaeda, fighting the Taliban. But in Syria, we wanted to fight against the government, and we wanted to arm the rebels, which were tied to Al Qaeda. So you'd be fighting them in one country and arming them in another. Why? Does that make any sense to anybody? Now, I'm not saying, I've got the inside of the president's ear and I know all the political ramifications of everything that goes on throughout the world and our politics. But there are obvious things that you look at, it just does not make sense. And that is one of them. The enemy is the enemy. You can't make them friends on one side and then fight them on another. The enemy is the enemy, and you need to continue to fight them, period, in any front that they pose against you. Now, I'll flip that over to the political side. There is a lot of talk about how we should reach across the aisle. We should do the bipartisan thing. Okay, bipartisan doesn't anything but screw everybody over. You don't win by giving in to the other side. You win by standing strong on your side. Well, what if you still lose? You don't lose. Okay, let's say a bill, for example. I'm strong on fiscal responsibility. We do not waste spending. We get the spending under control. We spend what we have and no more. Okay? I am strong on that, and I'm not going to give up until that is what we achieve. Well, why don't you just give in a little bit? No. This is how it needs to be. This is how I run my finances. This is how we need to run the finances in the government. Okay? Let's say you're the only one standing up for this, and the bill passes. Oh, well, you lost. You lost. No, I still won. Everybody knows I'm going to stick to my guns no matter what. And next time a bill comes around, they're not going to be looking at me to cave. They're going to be looking at me as the strong pillar that doesn't give in. And some of those weaker need guys that are, well, I don't know, I think I might switch sides. They're going to look at the strong people that know what they want and are not going to give up. The Democrats have most of this figured out. Harry Reid, Nancy Pelosi, they're not great cavers, I'll tell you that. They have their agenda, and they are standing on their agenda. They don't, well, we should reach across the aisle. No. They have their liberal agenda, and they expect us to come to them. That is why they're still in power. That's why they run the Congress. Plain and simple. Because they don't do the caving in. And that is something that the Republican establishment needs to figure out very quickly. Is that all this caving in, this little neutral, center of the road stuff does not work. It doesn't. One of the things that they had was that budget that they passed. And I was against that bipartisan budget, period. When you say the word bipartisan, coming together, making anything, there's always something wrong with it. Because somebody won and somebody lost. But we all lost. Somebody got what they wanted out of it, and then somebody had to give in to give them what they wanted. Well, we came up with a neutral idea, and the military really got the shaft on some of this. And in one of my other, I believe, broadcasts or news articles, I talked about it. So when you hear anything from the news media saying, oh, it was a bipartisan agreement, and they came together, and unity is not all coming together and giving in to each other. Yes, for one side to win, the other side has to give in general. But why does our side always have to be the one that gives in? Here's something that I've told several people that I work with the fiscal cliff that they call it. And they're already talking about another government shutdown and everything, and I just shake my head. You have the Democrats, okay? They're driving over the fiscal cliff of oblivion at about 70 miles an hour, driving headlong. This is how we're going to spend our money. Well, then you look at the Republicans. In general, not all of them, but in general. Same with the Democrats, by and large. Well, the Republicans are facing the other way, away from the cliff. However, they got their car in reverse, and they're going 55 over the same cliff. So who's hurting the country? They're both going to go over the cliff, but the Republicans are saying the whole time, no, we're just the opposite. But they are still driving the same direction. And that is the same for a lot of different issues. And one of the problems, I know a lot of you probably don't listen to the Rush Limbaugh show. I don't listen to it much myself, but I had a really good episode that I listened to. And one of the things they talked about was, Governor Christie and him with, his boardwalk thing with Obama. When you're hands in hands with what we view as the ultimate enemy of freedom, the Constitution, and you're standing alongside of them doing a whole photo op, we start asking questions. Whose side are you on? Well, obviously you want to be identified with the other side because that was your objective. One of the other objectives that the Republican establishment seems to have, the moderates, they are really anti-Tea Party. and they want to continue going after the conservative base. They want to get rid of them. By and large, get rid of them out of the party. Isolate them, marginalize them. Like they did with Ron Paul. Make him seem crazy, out of his mind. Some of the stuff Ron Paul talked about the IRS and the Federal Reserve, had he been elected, some of the stuff that we have now, the issues, the conspiracies, the Watergates of different areas, would never have happened. They would have been stopped in the bud. And there's pushes to end the IRS. Well, that was, that's a radical idea. It's marginalized. That's extremist. Well, actually, there was some good merit to that because the IRS has so much power that they shouldn't have. They have so much power over American lives that a lot of freedom that you could have is gone. And the Republican establishment loves going after the Tea Party. And then they wonder why, the one hand, well, you need to support us to go against the Democrats. But we're going to screw you when we get the chance. Well, don't expect our support if that is your whole plan. We're not blind. We're not stupid. We pay attention. You need to strengthen your own base. Democratic side, they don't have the major infighting as much as the Republican side does. Because the Republicans, you have conservative Republicans, you have moderate Republicans, and you have liberal Republicans. And that's in general. In different issues, you have the same thing. But Democrats, by and large, you have moderate Democrats and you have liberal Democrats. Except for a few small issues that you might be on the, quote, conservative side for, they're basically moderates or liberals. So they don't have to attack their base. They are the other side. They don't have the big melting pot of different sides like the Republican Party does. When the Republican Party decides to get behind their base and actually push forward for a successful outcome, instead of attacking their own side, we could actually start doing something in government. You wouldn't have the Republicans switching sides and passing horrible budgets and coming up with bipartisan shenanigans, pushing through Obamacare. Well, Obamacare passed, but there was Republican votes on it too. So when you're mad and upset, when you lose your insurance, don't just point the fingers at the liberals. Don't point your fingers at just the Democrats. You got to point your finger at everybody who is responsible for it. The weak-kneed Republicans that just caved in and wanted to cross the aisle for maybe a favor to be named later or for a little bonus package, they call them earmarks, put into the bill to help them out, to maybe exempt them, to do this or that. That is the problem that's got to be pointed out. It is the whole cake that's bad, not just one side. So you're probably going to ask, what do I do? And as I've been telling all my listeners all the time, you have a responsibility to vote. You have been given that right, that privilege. You need to use it, be responsible, and vote the way you believe. Don't vote for something very immaterial, color of skin, race, he sounds good, he parts his hair the right way, from left to right instead of right to left. Do it on substance. If you vote on substance, and this works for daily life too. Okay, if you vote on substance, there's going to be a lot better people in government if you vote on substance. In your daily life, when you interact with people, okay, whether it's a male or female, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, it doesn't matter. How you interact with them. You base your interactions on substance. Not how they look, how they sound, base it on their substance. How do they treat other people? How do they view themselves? Are they out for just their own self-interest? Or are they out to help everybody? You will hear all the time, well, we're here to help you. I always start asking questions when somebody starts claiming they're going to help me. We'll help you save money. We'll help you waste money, is probably what they're muttering under their breath. sales at a store. In order to save the money, you end up having to spend money to, quote, save money. Well, that's a different issue. I'm not going to get into it this time. But bottom line is you need to have substance for yourself. Know what you believe. When people ask, how do you feel about this? Be able to answer them. Be able to give them reasons. Not just, well, I just feel this way. I have a copy of the Constitution, and I try to carry it wherever I go. So when people ask, why do you believe X? I can show them. This is why I believe in the Second Amendment. Second Amendment guarantees I have a right to bear arms. And it shall not be infringed, even though the government loves to try to infringe upon it. And this freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all these freedoms of choice that I can do or not do. That is why I believe the way I believe. And you need to figure out why you believe the way you do. If you don't, you need to find out. Because otherwise, when the next great speaker comes around, you're just going to blow in the breeze, just like a leaf. No real backbone, just going with the flow. Or you can be like the oak tree, that, oh yeah, the limbs may move a little bit, but it ain't going anywhere. Because it is anchored in substance. And when I look at certain people in government, and I'll use Governor Christie as an example, I don't necessarily see a tree that's grounded in substance. He may try to say he is, but some of his actions don't show it. I respect the office of the president, just like most people should. But the current individual in there now, I can't say I do. There is too much he's backpedaled on, lied about, blatantly lied about. Need an example? You can keep your insurance if you like it. Millions of people like their insurance and they lost it. You need to come out and be honest about it that you made a mistake, and he hasn't done that. He's sorry that you lost your insurance. Okay, I'm sorry, you stubbed your toe, but that doesn't mean anything. It should be, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And people have a problem admitting that in today's society. But for Governor Christie, unless he changes a lot when it comes to the next presidential election, if he does run, he hasn't formally made a big announcement on it, and I don't think he's going to have much success with his current political snafu, if you want to call it, that he's in now. But if he does run, I don't think I can vote for him. He's done too much to reach across the aisle, enough standing up and taking the beating from the other side that you're going to get. When you stand on your principles and what you believe in, there are going to be people that don't like you, that are going to hate you. They're going to do what they can to destroy you. It's a fact of life. But are you going to cave or are you going to stand there? I'm not saying it's ever easy. There are things I believe in that not everybody does. And I've been harassed, made fun of for stuff I believe in. But you don't change just because it gets hard. You need to have the courage to stand up for what is right and to point out things that are wrong, no matter what it takes. It may cost you your next promotion. It may cost you a job. But I'd rather have my conscience intact than to sell my soul to the devil. And I hope you do too. Well, that's all we have time here, folks. I know this episode was a little long, but it's great to be back with you. Again, if you have any issues or topics you want me to discuss here on the radio program, you can shoot me an email at miked@erttradio.com. And, as always, live free and die free.